What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Mission Driven Made podcast. I'm really excited to introduce a mental performance coordinator, Coach Hannah Huesman, who has worked in Major League Baseball, has been in this career field for a really long time. And I'm just excited to learn about this because as me and Coach Huesman were talking offline, I've never met someone that's been in this official role before. I've just seen mindset type coaches on Instagram, which is cool and great and everything, but I'm really excited to talk to a professional. So, Coach, thank you for being on the show. I'm really excited right now to get to connect with you. So many
thank
questions.
you for having me. I'm excited to dive into all things mental performance. So thanks for having me.
Yep, of course. And what we normally do on the show before we get into all the juicy stuff, I love to hear about my guests' background a little bit with their upbringing, maybe before you started going down this type of career route. So if you can kind of tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how it led to everywhere you are today.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee. So you might hear a little twang come out every now and then in my talking, but I grew up playing sports my whole life. It was kind of our family's MO, like incredibly competitive and sports all the time. I have a younger brother who we're 21 months apart. So we grew up incredibly competitive against each other, from board games to like midnight hoops one-on-one, and somebody's crying every night, so
yes,
grew up incredibly competitive. And when I actually went to college to play softball. So I played softball at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, which is a small Division I school, and studied exercise science there. I really didn't know what I was going to do in my life, but I knew like I loved elite level performance and at the time sports. And now it's kind of grown to be both in sport and out of sport, but always knew I wanted to be around like elite level performers. Like it got me going, it got my flame going and my spark going. And so I actually ended up taking a intro to sports psychology class the last semester of my undergrad, and was like, what is this? How have I never heard of this? And like, why is every single person in the world not taking advantage of this? And from then on, I really like dove deep and didn't look back. Got my master's in sports psychology and motor behavior, which is a really fancy way of how the mind and the body work together to produce optimal performance. And I think the world puts so much emphasis on what we're doing physically with our bodies that we sometimes forget and totally neglect what our mental performance is doing and how much that supports what we're doing physically. And so I've spent the last 7 or 8 years trying to help people's mind work for them instead of against them. Because, as we know, that tends to happen a lot. So, and had the opportunity to work in baseball for 5 of those 7 years. And it's like the elite of the elite, and, always trying to find a way to get better. And it's been really cool to see, they're really good at all the physical things. And sometimes the thing that's going to separate them from the person sitting next to them is their mind. And so them really buying into that concept and diving into like making mental performance part of their everyday routine, like not just working on their physical game, but also their mental game. So,
that is awesome. And we're going to unpack a bunch of stuff there. I'm going to rewind a little bit actually to, you said you're competitive growing up and was it 21 months apart from your brother?
Yeah.
Are you the younger or the older?
I'm the older. Yeah.
Okay. I got a similar thing with my sister, but she's the younger. I think it's 21 months, but I understand that the competitive aspect of that for sure. Is that what carried over into the high school and college years? Because I know you said you're an athlete, you're a collegiate athlete. Is that where it really started? Like, could you feel it happening, with you and your brother?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like our happiest childhood memories were literally just constantly playing sports all day long and like watching each other play sports. And, our parents played high school sports and like dabbled in college a little bit in sports, but like, so they're pretty athletic too. And I don't know, like my first word was ball. So it was cool. Yeah, it was kind of just like, exposure as kids. And then it was like our whole life surrounded sports. And then, we started traveling all the time, and if it wasn't him, it was me. If it wasn't me, it was him. And so it was just, it was really like all we knew and loved and what kind of lit our whole family on fire. So
was it softball solely for you, or were you multi-sport type of?
I played softball and basketball my entire life. And like in high school, I ran cross country, did track, even was a cheerleader. I did gymnastics for 8 years when I was younger. So we really had our hand in just about everything. So
Gymnastics is, I mean, I don't know tons about, but that is, I don't know if underrated is the right word, but that is such a physical sport. Just the last year or two, I've learned a little bit more about gymnastics, and it is amazing. Like you guys go through a beating with gymnastics.
No, I firmly like attribute all of my success in other sports because of my foundation built in gymnastics. Like you learn body control, discipline, like you push your body in ways that you're like, what? I didn't even know I could do this, you know? So, and I thought it was, and then like flexibility creates speed, you know? So all of those things, like, no, I attribute all of my athletic success to my early childhood gymnastics saga. So
after you did gymnastics, did anything really feel physical for you anymore? I couldn't imagine it being as hard as that.
Yeah, I think the only thing that was harder, like genuinely harder after that, was cross country running.
Right.
I did cross country in 8th grade, and it was like, you know, in 8th grade you run a mile, but then I tried it my freshman year of high school, and the races went to 3 miles. And I remember being like, what in the world am I doing? Like, if there's anything I don't like, it's long distance running. And so, but no, everything else, I think it like prepared me for. And I was like, you know, not to toot my own horn, but it was always like the one strength I definitely had was my athleticism and my ability to like control my body and move quickly. And then it was just like fine tuning the other skills and other sports, but I definitely had like a solid foundation. And I definitely believe that's because of gymnastics.
And I feel like how well you learned to move your body in gymnastics, you're probably very coachable after that. I'd assume, like, if you had any strength and conditioning coaches in college, you already knew how to, you know, hip hinge and squat and do all the other things I'm sure that you learned in gymnastics. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so high school, college after, how did you decide, or how did you go into the softball route from there? Like, how did you pick that out of all your sports?
Well, it's actually a funny story. I actually went to college to play basketball. Played basketball my freshman year, and then actually switched sports my sophomore year and went from college basketball to college softball, and ended up playing softball my sophomore, junior, senior year. So it was really interesting for me. And, you know, when people go back and ask, like, do I have any regrets? You know, I played all the sports growing up, and like basketball and softball were my top 2 favorites. And I actually like didn't really decide to go with basketball until like late in my senior year. Like I was the one who my sophomore, junior, senior year, I was playing AAU basketball, which is travel basketball, and travel softball like year round. Like I was trying to do both because I literally couldn't make a decision. And I kind of found that softball was a little on the boring side for me at the time. Like it was almost coming too easy. My mom's been my softball coach my whole life. And so and basketball was really challenging, and like I was still good, but I wanted to be great at it. And so I was like, let's really like pour into this for a while. And so I did that, and I got an opportunity to go to University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, and play my freshman year, and it absolutely kicked my butt in every way, in every good, bad way, shape, or form. And ended up having to make a really hard decision after my freshman year on like, what was I going to do? Was I going to stay at the school that I had established all these relationships with, and maybe just hang up the sports coat or the sports label, athlete label? Would I change schools and go play basketball somewhere else? Could I change schools and go play softball somewhere else? Would I change schools and not do anything? Or could I stay here and maybe play softball? And what's cool is I was kind of recruited by the softball and basketball coach growing up at University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. And so when I was thinking about switching, I went and had a very open, vulnerable, hard conversation with the softball coach and was like, look, I'm looking for any opportunity. I want to stay at this school. I love this school. I'm already on a great academic track. And if I can stay and have this opportunity, like I would love to. And he was like, all right, like, let's see what you got. And so like had almost like a tryout / transitional year between basketball and getting back into softball shape, because they're totally different. Basketball, you're in more of a running cardiovascular shape, and softball, you have to be strong, right? You got to squat a lot and do all the heavy lifting. And so transitional year, and then ended up playing my junior and senior year. And as crazy of a story as it is, I think I've talked to one other person who's done something similar. I wouldn't change it for anything, but looking back on my high school career, I wish I like would have picked one a little bit earlier, because I felt like I was really good at both, but I didn't feel like I was like phenomenal at one of them. And that's my only regret looking back. But I also like, I don't know if I would have stayed in basketball. I don't know if I would have had the opportunities to work in baseball, right? That I've had this year. Like, I think being a female and having softball on my resume was a great look in the very beginning of getting my foot in the door in the baseball world. So I don't know. I firmly believe everything happens for a reason. So yeah, it's been a wild journey. It was a wild journey through college. That's for sure.
And you know what? Something that's been really fascinating to me, which I didn't understand till like the last year, a lot of athletes that are successful, I'm finding out more and more they played multiple sports, whether that was when they were young or
Yep.
every once in a while, your case in college, and they seem to dominate in their sport in part because of the sport they played before. And I kind of dug into that deeper with like Patrick Mahomes. You know how he played baseball and football. You watch him play and it's so unconventional, but he's so good. Like, did you see that with like basketball at all carrying over to softball? I know you said it's way different with the preparation, but did you feel that at all?
Yeah, I mean, and I absolutely agree with that. Like, when you're growing up, like, don't specialize in one thing your whole life. Like, play as many sports. Like, again, I don't think the concept is to like master a sport. It's like, be athletic, like get your body to move in various ways that is advantageous to anything you're doing. And I absolutely think, like, I was the fastest person on the softball team, like by far. And I think that's comes from basketball, right? So I could use my strengths in that scenario. And, I wasn't worried at all about conditioning now, but then I did need to build more strength. I definitely wasn't the strongest one on the softball team. Yeah. So it was like, I worked on that for the next 3 years. So I definitely think some skills transfer over. And, that's not to say like, don't stop. Like, I think if I would have gone back, I would have played softball and basketball my whole high school career still, but I probably would have only done travel ball and softball, like my whole, like really specialize in one, but still play the other ones. Like, do whatever will help your sport. So if it's track, run track. If it's cross country, run cross country. If it's making sure you're in a sport that's doing dynamic lifting, do that, because I absolutely believe those do transfer. And again, I think just like being athletic is the best thing you could do. So put yourself in situations to where you're not just doing the same thing over and over, but you're like keeping your body on its toes and keeping your mind on its toes too, of like, how do these skills transfer over from one to the other? But I totally think that's real. I love that.
Was the student athlete life just pretty hectic and crazy? Because I've thought about, it's like you guys that did that had, I mean, that's a full-time job in itself. And then you have school. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, incredibly challenging. Arguably definitely at the time, the hardest thing I've ever had to do. It was funny because we kind of talked about it like in a triangle, like you have your academic life, your sport life, and then your like friends and social life, right? And the classic joke was like, pick two of the three. You can have two of the three. So like if sports are going really well and your academics are going well, you probably don't have much of a social life. Or if your sports are going really well and you're into your social life, your academics are going to suffer.
Yeah.
So it was this constant and every day it would change, right? Okay, today I really got to be academic focused. So I'm not going to have a social life, or, okay, tomorrow I don't have a big test, so I am going to have my social life tonight, and it was constantly changing. And like, you just learn so much about time management. You learn about the things that you value. And then you learn very quickly what happens when you don't value something. You get like immediate feedback, whether it's less playing time, not in a relationship, or your grades go down. But it's a crazy life, like a day in the life was, 6 a.m. weights. So you're up at 5:30, you're at the weight room by 6 o'clock, you work out for an hour. You go home, you shower, you eat breakfast, and then you're in class from like 8 to 2, 8 to 3-ish all day, and lunch in between. And then, you go to practice from 3 to 5 or 3 to 6, and then you go grab dinner, and then you might have study hall from 7 to 9, and then you go home and die, right? Like you go home and you crash. And it's funny because even looking back to some of my friends were like, how in the world, we had 2 or 3 workouts a day. We were having 15 to 18 hour coursework, and we were still finding time to like hang out with each other. And like, but when you look back, you're like, that's why we would take 30-minute naps in the, community hallway and like, be running on fumes and go to sleep at 9 o'clock every night. And I don't know, it's crazy, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Like, I think it teaches you so many life skills and apply. Luckily I got to work in a sport world after I graduated, but a lot of my friends don't. And all of their skills that we quote unquote learned and developed in college, being a college athlete, like transfer so well over to the business world, right? Like you are resilient, you can handle a lot of pressure, you can handle a tight schedule and balance a lot of things and are good at time management and are aggressive and competitive and want to keep working and don't take no for an answer. And so it's it's really cool to see, because I've also had friends who weren't athletes and didn't experience that. And like, some of them struggle in the real, some of them pick it up really fast, but some of them are like, wow, this is crazy. And I'm like, this is nothing compared to being a Division I student athlete, and so no, I think those skills are pretty incredible what they can teach you for the real world.
And it's not like you're taking some easy classes. Like I'm sure you had to take anatomy and physiology and classes like that it's like you could be the smartest person in the world, but you have to memorize a lot of stuff. It's not like you could just wing that.
Yeah. I remember I tell the story whenever I can. My senior year, I think it was advanced exercise physiology. And the final exam was literally name every muscle that's used when a basketball player shoots a jump shot.
Ooh.
And I literally remember being like, okay, write down every muscle you can even remember the name of and go. I mean, and you write down, 150 muscles and you're just like hoping that's right. But yeah, it was incredibly challenging.
And so as you're approaching the end of your college career, what happened then? What was your mindset like? And at that point where you're like, okay, I'm going full send with, mental performance?
Yeah. So my junior year, I took my undergrad was in exercise science. So all about how the body works and moves to produce performance. And I took it, excuse me, an internship with our strength and conditioning coach. And so cool. I thought for a long time I was going to be a strength and conditioning coach, and ended up doing it. And I loved a lot of aspects about it, but there was just like, it wasn't like get me going and like, oh, I can't wait to go do this in the morning. It was kind of like a little bit of dread. And so I was like, okay, this isn't it. And like I said, I took an elective sports psychology class my last semester of college. And like the minute we started talking about it, I was like, oh my gosh, is this it? And what's cool is, I really didn't know what I was going to do as soon as I graduated, which was going to be in like 4 months. And my mom has her master's degree in clinical psychology. So she's always kind of pushed psych a little bit.
Oh, it's so cool.
And I was like, yeah, and I love it. But I'm like, Mom, I just like working with the general population, like was always like, I don't know. I was like, I want to work with like go-getters, and like, I can practice empathy on go-getters. I'm not the best like empath when it comes to just like, I'm just tired and don't want to get out of bed in the morning. Like, I'm going to look at you and be like, what? Find a way. Let's go. Come on.
Don't even get me started with that. Just keep preaching because yes.
Yeah. So, I was just like, I don't know, like this normal population, like I want to work with like elite of the elites. Like I don't, and I don't know what that looks like. And then I find sport psychology and I'm like, wait, what? Like, this is incredible. We can impact virtually do very similar work to what we would do with the normal population, but with athletes and high performers. And so I started researching like where that professor, Shawani Howard Baptiste, who's amazing, where she went to grad school and like other opportunities. And at the time, my now husband was my boyfriend back then, and he was still playing. And I was like, look, I want to be kind of close. And so ended up the University of Tennessee in Knoxville had a great master's program in applied sports psychology. And like, to me, like I wanted to be as hands-on as possible. Like, while I love the research, like I get fired up by actually doing it. And so their program was very applied. And so I went there and I had interviews and applied for that program and got it. And it was like, this is too good to be true. Like, but we're doing this. And then a year and a half later, like graduated early and then hit the ground running. So it was really cool just to watch it unfold, but it never would have happened had I not been like, oh, sports psychology. Okay, I'll take this class. Like, it sounds great. I could have taken anything else, but it was that moment and going into it with an open mind of like, what is this? And then it was like, I was actually like, my first reaction was so mad because we didn't have that for 4 years. And I'm on like my last semester of my career. I knew I wasn't going to go play professionally or anything. And I was like, I cannot believe I haven't had this for 4, like I'd arguably be a ton better than what I would be right now and like what I would have done. So I always wish I had that. And kind of from that point on, it was like, all right, go give this to as many people as you possibly can.
And so where did you like physically go after you're completely done with school? What did that look like?
Yeah. So I did a couple internships while in school. And then as soon as I graduated, which was in December, I actually applied for a Pittsburgh Pirates Major League Baseball organization internship as a mental skills coach, mental performance coach. And I actually ended up landing that internship. And so I had January off and preparing. And then about halfway through February, I moved down to Bradenton, Florida, because that's where the Pirates spring training was and where their lower level facility is in minor league. So I went to Bradenton, Florida for my first ever internship in professional baseball.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was incredible. Awesome. I think the biggest takeaway there was learning how to like, you read about it in the book, but then how to actually apply it is a whole nother skill, right?
Right.
It's like you learn all these concepts, you understand it, you memorize it, right? You've got it, but then to actually implement it and talk to athletes in a way that they want to be talked to, and not just like, oh, well, according to this theory, like this is this, right? You can't
Yeah.
do that. And so it's like speaking their language, and which is another adjustment you have to make. But luckily I wasn't too far removed from the athlete scene, and all my
Yep.
friends are athlete. My husband's an athlete. So I could practice on them and get some good reps in, and then take it to the guys there, and kind of started to develop my philosophy and my niche and like what I love to do. And my passion just kind of skyrocketed from there. Super cool.
So if you could take us through, if there is a typical day, what would that look like for someone that is a mental performance coach or coordinator?
Yeah. Great. I love the little side note of if there is a typical day,
Yeah.
because there's really not. Every day looks different. And especially if you're traveling, and especially if you're in, I guess in any field, but especially in baseball, there's a bunch of minor league teams and obviously the big league team. And so you're kind of on the road, but if you broke it down, regardless of if it starts early or late, I always get my workout in the morning, and then I head in, and usually the day starts with a few meetings, whether it's like staff meeting or staff development meeting or even player development meeting. So that's where we actually, as like a mental performance coach, can get up and present like a workshop or do some kind of a group presentation on whatever theme we were talking about that week, or something that we know the guys are really struggling with. Maybe they're struggling with resetting in between a bad pitch and getting ready for the next pitch to hit, or having a growth mindset about failure, right? And how do we get over failure in the heat of the moment, whatever it can be. So there's usually some kind of meeting, then there's a group workshop, and then a lot of observation during the day. So you're kind of being around, you're on the field with them, you're helping out wherever you can, and you're having little side conversations kind of with everybody around you. Something they talk about a lot in mental performance is you don't necessarily want to be like in the middle of the huddle, but you also don't want to like never be seen. So it's kind of like be around, but be in the background. That's what we talk about a lot, is you never want to like be MIA, and people always are like, where is that person? Right. But you never want to be like leading a huddle necessarily, unless it's a drill that you're specifically implementing.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of observations, small conversations, and then you start one-on-one conversations. And so whether that's outside or go up in the office and hang out and have an individual conversation with an athlete and help them figure out what it is that they're going, and go a little bit deeper than maybe you could in a group workshop, and really individualize that for whoever your client is. And that also could be players, that could be staff, that could be front office, like whoever needs it. Like, just because you're not technically like an athlete, you're always performing, right? Which I think is really cool. If you have a job, if you host a podcast, like you're performing in some way, shape, or form, right? And so these skills kind of go for anybody, which I think is really cool. And then, at the end of the day, you're getting notes in and you're preparing for the next day, and debriefing, because it's very mentally tasking to be a mental performance coach, because you have to be so in tune with what's going on right across from you, right? Like I can't afford to tune out in the middle of a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
Like I can't afford to not be in the present moment with someone, or else I'm like missing something incredible that we could be talking about. And so, but being present all day and listening to people all day, it takes a toll on you. And so at the end of the day, it's really making sure you're taking care of you too. I always say, you can't pour from an empty cup. I've loved hearing that. And especially us, like we're trying to help them be the best they can be. Like, how dare we not be the best we are for them, And so that's taken me some time to figure out how to do that. But yeah, that's a day in a life. It's kind of consists of a ton of individual conversations and some group conversations, and then supporting the staff around us and becoming part of the culture of whatever it is you're doing, instead of sitting behind a computer screen, which sometimes it can get easy doing that too. But yeah, it's putting yourself out there and becoming a part of whatever team or organization you're a part of.
That seems like a dream job to me. That seems so cool. Would you ever notice, since you work with obviously a lot of people, was there ever struggle getting certain athletes, coaches, or staff members bought in to mental performance? Because it's one of those things I feel as though, I mean, to me, it's easy to buy into something like that, but like someone, if they're not exposed to that before, they could be like, oh, I'm fine. I don't need that. Would that ever be did you see that at all?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because at first I would kind of take it personally and be like, what do you mean? Like everything I've studied, like you don't care anything about, like, but But, I think that's interesting because I think in any field, there's going to be people who aren't interested, right? There's people who like dietitians and people want nothing to do with nutrition, right? Or people
Right.
hate going to the weight room, like professional athletes. Some professional athletes hate going to the weight room. Like it takes
Crazy.
everything. Yeah, it takes everything to have. So I kind of tried to take away the personal part of it. Like, okay, great. And some people just mental performance isn't their thing. And and I will say, like, some people don't need it as much as other people, right? Some people just like some people don't need a push in the weight room, right? They're really good. They're really passionate. They're really dug in and they're doing the right thing. So all you kind of have to do is like keep them in their guardrails, and so like some people have lived really resilient lives and have figured out what works for them and what doesn't. And like, we're just here to like support that. But with people who have never really had exposure, but aren't open-minded about it, those are the people that like I work really hard on. And, it's funny because you learn really early on in mental performance, you can't force mental performance on someone. Like, hey, you need to work on it. Like you're going to push them. They're going to turn around and run the other direction, or they're going to like sit there and listen to you and not really listen to you. So it's really about, one way I heard it put is, if you walk past, let's say you walk past two classrooms and the wooden doors with like this tall, skinny window you can look in. Let's say you have two classrooms next to each other. And in one classroom, you have two people in there and they're dancing, right? They're taking dance lessons. And then in the class next to them, you have two people in there and they're taking wrestling lessons, right? But let's say they're wearing the same thing, right? If you just walk by and glance in, it could look very similar, right? Like there's two people kind of going back and forth, like whatever, touching each other, like doing this, doing that. But when you open the door, it's very different, right? When you're dancing with someone, you're kind of meeting them where they're at. If they take a step forward, you take a step forward, like it's kind of jiving with them. Whereas wrestling is like, you're trying to pin them to the ground and like win, right? And that's kind of how I think about like teaching people who aren't buying in immediately. Like if I wrestle them to the ground, I'm going to be done. But if I meet them where they're at, and so for me, that's if I can build a really good, solid relationship with you that has nothing to do with mental performance. Maybe we talk about your dog or your girlfriend or your family or anything besides the sport that you're playing, like hunting, like whatever you light up with, I'm going to talk about that with you and start to build that connection. And then when you have this aha moment where you're like, oh shoot, I actually really need to work on my mental game, or this is something that's holding me back in what I'm doing, the first person I'm going to go talk to is the person I have a good relationship with. And I want to make sure that's me or the mental performance team, right? I don't want to, well, he's not in mental performance, so I'm not even going to invest in him as a human being, period, paragraph. Well, then when he does struggle, he's not going to go to you, like, because who are you, right? And now it's even weirder because you guys have been around each other for a year or two or three, and you don't know anything about him, right? Versus like, oh, finally you're coming. And then when they walk in the door and they ask a question and they're open-minded, then it's like, we hit the ground absolutely sprinting because that foundation is already there. And we don't have to start from ground zero or even negative, because it's like, we should know each other, but we don't. I'm not even sure what name is, all this stuff and going from there. But you just build a relationship and create that foundation. And whenever they're ready, the first thing they do is think about coming and talking to you. Yeah. And then, and I mean, it happens all the time. And it's cool because in a world like baseball, right, where a lot of people do buy in, it's like, are you the one guy who isn't buying in and like all your buddies are buying in? Because then it's like, you kind of lean on that too, right? If everybody else is buying into you, he will eventually come around or she will eventually come around, and they do. And it's like, just like, don't shame them for that, but like meet them where they're at. And when they're ready, be ready, basically.
Can I steal that analogy that you used about 2 minutes ago in the future? Because that was a perfect picture. I really love it.
No, yes, of course. Please do.
Awesome. And then something else I noticed in your bio that you worked with FDNY. That hits home for me. I was a firefighter paramedic for San Diego Fire for a while in that career field in the past. So I saw that you did that. What was that like? I think that's a place where that type of coach could be used, but to my knowledge, there isn't any official coaches, at least in most departments. So yeah. So absolutely incredible. Some of my like all-time favorite work was with the FDNY. So I actually so between my time with the Pirates and the Phillies, I lived in New York City for about a year and a half. And I worked with a private practice, and one of the organizations we got involved with was called Leadership Under Fire. And it's run by a guy named Jason Bresler, who's a former Marine, total badass. And he was so passionate. So he played baseball in college. And so he had heard about mental performance and sports psychology and performance psychology. And he was so passionate about that
that he was like, how do we bring this into the world of firefighters and like, you know, who are arguably in the most stressful situations that you're ever in, right? Life and death situations. And, you know, you've got kids screaming on the other side of a door that you can't break down. Like, how do you stay composed and calm under pressure and control your breathing? And so got linked up with them. And actually, you know, in New York, there's this place called The Rock that is, I guess it's like close to the Bronx area, I think, in Manhattan. And it's basically like a whole facility of buildings that they actually set on fire and like go through drills and like do drills on how to actually execute the plan of attacking the fire and what does that look like. And so we would do stuff in the classroom where we would talk through things. We would kind of go through an imagery script and like have the firefighters visualize what exactly they're going through. And then we would go out and do it. And like, okay, how are you controlling your breathing when you're doing this? And you know, we found a lot of times when working with firefighters, it was a lot of go, stop, go, stop. And so we were like, how can we take advantage of that stop time, right? When you're just waiting for the next person to carry up the next flight of stairs, the hose up the next flight of stairs, right? Whatever it is. And really trying to take advantage. So it was a lot of visualization, a lot of breathing techniques, a lot of how to stay calm under pressure, different strategies, and just talking through like concepts of the job that you never really realized you could work on and get better at. And it was, I mean, you have a group of 50 grown men, right? Who have been firefighters longer than I was alive at the time. You know, I was like 25, 26 when I was there. And they're like looking at you like wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and like ready to learn because they have this elite mindset. It's the same in pro sports. It's like, how can I continue to get better here? And it's not just like fire talk, it's mental talk. How do I perform mentally my best and make sure I'm okay and in a good headspace to actually like do the job and do the job well. And it was so rewarding and so cool and like just a great group of guys. But yeah, pretty amazing work that they're doing up there. But I think they're trying to expand across like a ton of, I've gone to Colorado a couple times and spoken at events here and there. So yeah, it's called Leadership Under Fire, and it's pretty amazing.
That's great, especially because in that culture, especially more in the past, it's very much just suck it up and rub dirt on it type of thing.
Yes.
I did see the last few years that mindset. I mean, that mindset's still there, but I feel like it's improving a little bit. But it would be awesome to see someone like you or someone like that organization all over, you know, the country to help with that. So that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I love it. He's doing awesome work.
And so after you did that, what was where did life take you next after that?
Yep. So I was there for about a year and a half, and you know, it was interesting because that was more of a private practice role, and I learned a lot about that. But you know, and we were a startup private practice, and so we were doing a lot of cold calling and kind of trying to get clients and build that, and it was really challenging. And you know, I kind of was just like, I want to go do the work. Like, I want to go do the work. I just want to, like, again, going back to like what fires me up is like just hands-on doing the work. And so I started to look back for opportunities in the baseball world and had a couple. And then, you know, the best fit was the Phillies organization. And they gave me the opportunity of a lifetime. And so went there and spent the last 4 years there, going from a mental performance coach to a mental performance coordinator, and really building the program of mental performance there. And what does that entail? And how do we get these athletes to buy in and get over that stigma of, you know, mental performance is for the weak. Instead, it's like, no, mental performance is for the strong who want to get stronger, and want to be better. And it was really cool kind of flipping that narrative for them. And then, you know, in 4 years, you see like players kind of shift from not talking about it to being like, you have a session? No, I thought I had a session, you know, like fighting over who has sessions, and like, because they are so excited and they see like what an integral part of their performance this actually is. And they'll come up and be like, dang, yesterday was a bad day. And it's like, let's talk through that. Like, that doesn't, like, guess what? The best of the best have bad days. Like, so why was it a bad day? What can we learn from it? How can we grow from it? Like, and how can we continue to get better for you and become the best version of you? And so it's just like, just talking about this, like, it's not a bad thing. Like, we all need it. So we might as well all talk about it, or we're all not going to talk about it. And then we're all going to get beat by other opponents who are talking about it. So that's been the last 4 years. It's been pretty amazing.
And if you were to unpack So say any athlete that's really struggling, especially with elite athletes, could you normally unpack that to something that has to do with their mental game or mental state? Like there's some block there?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Um, I would say most of the time, absolutely. Even if it starts with a physical component, that physical component paired with frustration, which
Mm,
is a mental component, is affecting it, right? And it's cool. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and they were like, instead of like trying to pick out like what's going wrong physically, maybe we should start with like how are we doing mentally before we try to like dissect this entire thing from a physical standpoint, and then we realize it's something going on mentally, and it's just confidence at the plate. Your swing's great. Why aren't you hitting the ball in the game? Right? Like, do we think your swing is changing that drastically from practice to the game? Maybe, but if it's not from like a naked eye or even from film, then to me, that's nothing physical. But I think humans have such a reaction to always go to change the physical, right? Like, well, what's wrong with this? Well, we can make this adjustment. And next thing you know, you've made 15 adjustments and now you're in an even deeper hole. And it's like, shoot, maybe there was no physical. And then I can't tell you many times where guys are like, yeah. And so I just decided to start doing my old swing, and I did my old swing, and now I'm out there being successful. And I'm like, so maybe it wasn't the swing in the very beginning to start with. Maybe it was just your
yeah.
belief in the swing or your ability to be resilient or your ability to get into the present moment. But like so many times it's not something physical. And again, and then sometimes it is. So it's really just having that open perspective when something isn't going right. Like, don't just automatically assume it's something physical. Like, let's really dive into like, what's actually going on here? Like, why do I think I'm not having success? What is the computer saying? What is this coach saying? What am I saying? What am I feeling? And then go from there. Because once you get into this hole of like where you can't figure out where it is, it gets really messy. But maybe you shouldn't have even been looking for something that was physically wrong in the first place. Maybe it was just a mental check-in, and then you could have gone from there. But now you're in a hole, and now we got to dig ourselves out of that hole.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And so how would you say for the general population of people, even, a lot of listeners that aren't elite athletes, aren't professional athletes or anything like that, why would you say mental performance is important for them, and how can they get into this mental performance type of thing to improve whatever they are doing or whatever career field they're in?
Yeah, I think one of my selling points is like, imagine if you work so hard physically and you like master all the physical skills, and then you get to the big leagues and your mind fails you. Like, could you imagine like
Oh,
working
geez.
so hard, right? Working so hard physically. Physically, you're ready. You're there. You're the strongest. You're the fastest. Your bat swing's good. Your fielding's good. Your pitching good. Whatever your niche is to be good at. But then your mind fails you. And so it's like, and then you kind of start talking to them about how do you prepare mentally, or you ask the question. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, how much of the game do you think is mental? And they'll say anything from 50% to 100%. And then you'll say, well, how much of your practice time are you working on the mental game?
Ooh.
And exactly. And
There's
then
a
there's this
little
answer.
different.
Yeah, there's this answer of like, oh, and you're like, yeah. And like, look, I'm not expecting you to go from working on your mental game 10 minutes a week to an hour a day, right? Like, I understand time is valuable, but what I would challenge them to do is, how can we start pairing some mental reps or mental skills or mental strategies into the physical work that you're already putting into? So even just like, okay, having an external or an internal focus when you're hitting in the cages, taking a deep breath before every pitch, right? How can we make mental practice part of physical practice? That way it's not this another thing that we have to add to your plate, right? Because I know sometimes we feel like we have zero time to do anything, which that's a whole nother conversation of what are you prioritizing. But I'm okay with that, because the time I want you to use mental performance the most anyway is in a game or in a high leverage situation. And so let's practice it in high leverage situations, just like you're practicing physical skills to get ready for a game. Let's practice the mental skills to get ready for a game too. And I think once you sell that, you're also like, do you expect confidence to just pop up in the game? Do you expect to just be able to handle failure in a game? Like, you wouldn't expect to be able to just hit a changeup in a game and like hope your body just takes over and hits it, right? No, you're working diligently on hitting this changeup, but yet we're not working diligently on staying calm under pressure. And so it's like really selling them on that point. And it's cool because when you really break it down, like training for mental performance and mental toughness is just like you would train for physical performance and physical toughness. And then like getting through that, but you have to actually practice it. And I think people just kind of hope it pops up and like, oh, I'll just
Yeah.
push through it. And it's
Yeah.
like, what? Like, it sounds great. And I think that's a big thing with mental performance is people can say, hey, calm down, or hey, push through it, or hey, be confident out there. People have got the what down, but how?
Yep.
How do I stay calm? How do I be resilient? How do I build confidence in a situation where I'm
Yeah.
not very confident? That's where I think the biggest miss is. Like, we're not actually, we don't know how to do it. We all like to talk about what to do, but we don't know how to do it. And even more importantly, we don't know why we need to do it. Like, a lot of times we tell somebody like, don't be nervous. What if being nervous is better for your performance? And so it's really like taking a step back and figuring out, what does this athlete or performer need, and how are we helping them get to that and see that? And then how are we helping them create that in a moment of insane pressure or stress, because everything's harder in those moments. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I could see how that could apply just about anywhere in life outside of athletes for sure. And I wanted to make sure that I asked you this as one of the last questions here. So as we talked about offline for a second, you were at the Elite by Choice event. So can you tell us how that went and how it was being a speaker there?
Yeah. So Elite by Choice, shout out to Lauren Johnson, who is one of my lifelong professional colleagues. We've kind of been on this journey together, and it's been amazing to see us both kind of simultaneously grow together. But yeah, she put on this event, and it was kind of like a master's mind, small, intimate event. And it's almost like a mini conference, I guess. And we had, there was, I think 5 or 6 speakers who came in and spoke, and I was lucky enough to be one of them. And, we just talked all things mental performance, from the actual like applied side and doing the work to the business side of things. And like, what does that look like? And how can you sell clients on mental performance from both the sport world and the corporate world, right? And what does that look like? And how can we make sure there's good people in the field doing good work, right? Because even today, like, mental performance is still like trying to make a name for itself and figure out what that is, and people learning about what it is. And so it's like, how can we do a better job of that? And how can we get the word out and do good work to where everybody's starting to realize, whoa, like, this is something we all need. We don't just need leadership development. We need mental performance development too. And from sports to corporate to being a parent, to being a significant other, to being a youth athlete, right? I think everybody's a performer. But no, it was an awesome event, very, very intimate, very vulnerable, and people just putting their stuff out there, which I think too is rare in fields. Nobody likes to like share their secrets of what they're doing or how they found success. But the reality is the mental performance world is in dire need of that, because we need more people out here talking about what it is that we do and doing it well. And so it was cool to just get a group of really passionate people together and talk missions and philosophies and experiences and really start to spread the word on mental performance and get good people doing good work, because that only does good for all of us in the field. So it was an awesome event. So shout out to Lauren.
Awesome. And Coach, where can people connect with you if they're looking to do so?
Yeah, it's pretty easy to find. My stuff is just my first and last name. So Instagram is Hannah Huesman. I think Twitter's Hannah_Huesman, and LinkedIn, I'm also there as Hannah Huesman too. So come check me out. I got a Mental Sweat Monday video that comes out every Monday. It's 1 minute. So for all of you who are like, what is mental performance? I want to learn more about it. That's a great place to start.
Awesome. I'm going to make sure to connect all those in the show notes so our listeners can check you out and connect with you.
Perfect.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning into the Mission Driven Made podcast. If you found value today in the episode, which I know you did, go ahead and subscribe to the show. Leave us a 5-star review. And Coach, thank you again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be on the show. And I think you probably brought me the most value today out of anyone that's going to be listening to this when it comes out. So thank you so much for that. So excited that I got to connect with you. And until next time, everyone, stay mission driven.
Yeah.
All right. And done.